Thank you so much, Menka. Thank you, Sonal. Very happy to be here today, this evening, and just listening to Akash and Chatrali's conversation. So a wonderful session. Thank you, IPL, for having me here. Um, So I would like to introduce, I'll be moderating this session on the systematic approach that we look for, bringing blue sky ideas into life. And it is a lot of pleasure for me to welcome Debashish Paul, who's going to be the speaker for this session. As I was kind of going through Debashish's profile and met with him, it is all about somebody who's extremely creative and just takes everything that life has to, offer. So Debashish currently works as a product designer with Facebook, and he has worked on, some of the very high impact, socially powered experiences in the Facebook app, like live and entertainment, sharing and stories, ads. And through his work of envisioning, innovating, and crafting valuable experiences for people, he has impacted the industry by inventing several things in the live and stories domain. And I'm sure all of you who be using the Facebook would relate to that. Just talking a couple of interest areas of Dave, he really enjoys poetry, and he's reads a mix of philosophy and psychology. And a very lighter part of him, he looks for humor in everything that he does. And very great to know that good art, thoughtful cinema, well-documented essays are something that smaller things in life that really makes him happy. So very happy to have you, Debashish, here. And just before we get started with Debashish, I think we just have a little poll which will come up. So please look out for that. All right, yeah. Do you have a clear understanding of the career path of a user experience designer? As I'm looking at it, there are a lot of designers that we have here. So you will have this for another 5-10 seconds. And as the looks like that we have a good mix here, a lot of people who are designers who are really looking forward to learn a bunch of things here. All right, so what does the final survey results say? Okay, so all right, so there are probably some UX designers who are accidental designers and they would like to know more about it. Thank you. There's probably just another question, question number 2. How closely do you think a design team should be part of the product management team? I also was listening to some of the product management questions that we had as part of the previous sessions. Okay, that's, yeah. So in a lot of companies, yes, the product and the design team, product management and the design team work pretty closely. So yeah. All right, I think it looks good where 90% of the people say yes. Great. This kind of sets it up that, yes, we definitely have some questions on that front, and probably you will see it later. Thank you. Over to you, Debashish.
Cool. Can we get this poll out of the screen now? Cool. Okay. And I'll go ahead and share my screen. So, and just confirm if you're able to see my screen, which is white right now.
Not yet. Hasn't come up
Is
yet. Yeah,
is that
still
visible
coming
now?
up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's loading up.
Okay, cool. I think, yeah, so it's actually a blank page right now. So if you see a white screen, that's enough.
Oh, all right. I thought it was still loading.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Cool. Yeah, thanks for that generous introduction, and thanks for having me here today. And I'm actually doing this for the first time in this format, so I have a very weird camera, my monitor, and like my keyboard setup here, so I might be like shifting my views. So bear with me with that. But I honestly feel this format is working better for me because I'm generally a little shy as a person. So I carry a huge stage fear sometimes. So this is already working out. So let's see how this goes. Just before starting, I would like to kind of mention it's more of a not a disclaimer, but like just to kind of set expectations. Is I really don't have any advice or suggestion for you to just like work or bring blue sky ideas to life. It's a topic that takes years for someone to master, or a team to master, or a company to master, right? So what I want to talk about is why I'm excited about being a designer, and what keeps me moving forward in the things that I get to do. So it will be a very high level, generic kind of share out of my thoughts about design and how I approach things, especially in vision building. And if there isn't anything particular, I would be happy to, kind of talk about it in the Q&A session, based on interest, right? So let's get started. And I think one thing I really believe in is this is the most exciting and the most important time to be a product designer, especially the digital product designer that you and I are. And I want to focus, or I usually put my energies mostly into the important part, rather than the exciting part. Um, and then today, as we talked about, I'm going to talk about shaping blue sky ideas, um, but generally like looking at how we can do it in a systematic way. We know, like I said, it's not a topic that can be covered within 45 minutes. So I will generally touch upon my own experiences of building towards a vision, right? So I know we might have heard of this word, or we have worked on a lot of vision building before, but to me, what is a vision, right? What do we mean by vision? So I think about vision as an imagined reality, where you want to exist, except you want everyone to exist, not yourself, but everyone, your users, your company, your own business, maybe, or maybe your own philosophy to exist, except the problem that you are solving for, right? So a reality, an imagined reality, where the problem that you're solving for is gone, and everyone is in this new world, new reality that you have created or helped create with the product or the service that you have designed. But the reality of the reality is that every reality comes in its own context. It has its own constraints and limitations, and it has its own conditions, right? So how do you think bold, be free to dream, and yet find ways to walk into that reality and exist? So I think one way I start with usually is defining the problem. And I think this is something that we all do. There are so many methods and processes to do that. But I think there is a way in which a designer can approach this, right? And it's about like thinking deeply about the problem, framing it, defining it, asking a lot of questions, of course, asking if the problem is real, first of all, right? Going to the depths of finding the why, right? Why is this a problem at all? Why should I be solving it? Or why should my company be solving it, right? So having those things very, very crystal clear in your head to start with. So so like I said, sorry, I kind of did not proceed with the slides, but like I said, these are some basic questions you need to ask in the defining the problem phase. And the way I look at problems is problems are like onions, right? Um, I like to peel them until I reach the bud, right? So, when you keep peeling the onion, you kind of uncover so many things, and you ultimately or finally reach the bud. And most of the times, it is the bud which is the problem, real problem. So, solving for the bud, most of the times solves for the whole onion, right? So that is kind of one metaphor that I look at in my head. It is like my own metaphor of thinking or looking at problems. But generally, like, I feel like, like here the real problem lies, but I feel any problem is a problem, is a real problem, if it limits us or people that you are designing for from extending or improving their abilities or our ability from doing something, right? It could be anything. It could be the thing that you have identified as a need, and the thing that your product or service kind of solves for. So there's always this idea of extending your abilities, like any software service, right? So here I would like to go a little bit back into a story about uh, all of us, right? Like the story of human evolution. Uh, we actually evolved and became the most superior species on the planet by building things, right? Like we had this creativity to figure out what our needs are, like how can we kind of cope with it, adapt with it, and solve for it, and like then go ahead, iteration over iteration. We kind of found out our own needs and solved for our own needs, right? And where did these needs come from? I think it came out from our desire to extend our abilities, right? It was always this other thing that you felt like, oh, can I do more with my hand, or can I do more with my legs, right? And in the process, we invented things for the first time and like experienced this world where we felt this new energy, new ways of doing that thing. And then from over centuries, we innovated on top of that invention, right? So be it be it the tools that we use, the way we extend our hands. You see, when we started with this one need, and that need is still the same, but we have evolved in the way we kind of look at these tools, the way we kind of extend the capabilities or abilities of our hands. Likewise, our legs, right? Like we had these two legs, which let us go from point A to point B. We knew how to walk, and then we knew how to run. By running, we reached from a point to another point faster, but we wanted to be even faster. So we added the bicycle, or we added the pedals, or we added the wheels, which we could control with our same legs. And that extended the abilities of our legs, right? And then more recently, I think the way we connect, we started, a few centuries ago, few centuries ago, we started finding how we can reach someone without actually reaching someone. So the message pigeons are a good example of like shrinking the distance and time. And then from there, we are doing this today, right? Like we all are connected on this virtual video call from across the globe, right? So that is the evolution of that one need that we had around how do we connect with people. And in the recent examples, flying is something that is a great example. And I think there was always a desire to do more than what we were biologically capable of. And flying is a great example of something we were primarily not capable of, right? But we saw creatures that flew, and we found that powerful. And we're like, oh, can I do that? Or can we do that? And our desire was to achieve that ability. And so we did it a little more than a century ago. This is the first flight of the Wright brothers in 1903. And you see, like over this last a little more than a century, what we have done is kind of innovated on that invention that the Wright brothers did a century ago, right? So the modern aeroplane still serves the same purpose, maybe in a way more faster, safer, and like in a way more technologically advanced way, but it does solve that same basic purpose, that desire to extend our abilities, right? Um, in the context of computers, Steve Jobs had this great quote. He said, computers are like the extension of our minds, right? I mean, computers are to our mind that the bicycle was to our foot. And that's a very interesting thing to think about when you're thinking about or creating this analogy of ability extension. And we are our digital designers. We are creating products for for the computer in every aspect of our life. And if that computer extends, it's an extension of our mind, how do we think about the users that we design these products for? And that is something that really, really intrigues me as a designer. And I feel like, what does it even mean to use a to-do app and get the feeling of, extending my abilities as a human being, right? And, yeah, I mean, these are like thoughts to ponder upon. But if you really think about it, there are these like several modalities in which we live today. The computers have extended us in many ways and brought into new realities. Uh, and it has kind of altered the way we think, the way we see the world, we see ourselves. Um, we design, and honestly, like we design for this new reality, right? So we are all product designers doing that. So I think here I will want to bring some of my like personal challenges that I have faced or still face today as a product designer. And I found an approach that is effective in my context, and the way I look at things is this way of like balancing between your imagination, responsibility, and attention. I feel like these are three aspects that, as a product designer, you should always keep in mind when you're working on a newer problem, newer set of challenges, or maybe designing a new product or designing a new feature in the product that will enable your customers, your users to do something new and explore themselves in newer ways, right? Uh, so I call this a three lens approach, and the way I look at it is like there are these lenses that we tend to kind of put together in the way we look at the world around us, right? And the three lenses approach to me, where the first lens I look at is the telescope. And here you basically have this like bolder vision definition phase, and then the next lens I think about is the binoculars. And here I think about myself as a scaler, thinking about scale, how to be more flexible and think about things in the context that I am in. And the third one is the magnifying glass, or I think about it as someone who is an optimizer. So let's get into like each of these in a little more details. The explorer, or the telescope, as I said, here is what you're basically looking at, a North Star, right? Ideally, finding a direction to walk on, to be close to that North Star. Choosing the right North Star will make the journey worthwhile, actually. So it's very important to explore or look into this vast sky of things, in a very, very thoughtful way. No matter how long it takes for you to reach there, but knowing that the North Star exists, that belief, creates that journey worthwhile, right? So in this phase, like thinking about, why does this exist? How does it relate, right? How does this problem or this space relate to other things that you look into in your life, and how the user is relating to it? Is this meaningful for people? Like I said, like, is this extending some of their abilities? Is this making them feel safer, smarter, and happier? Is this meaningful for you in the sense, like, you as a designer, you as a member of the team who is solving this problem, you as the company that you're a part of, or the organization that you work for, or your own like company, right? And why has no one solved it yet, right? It's a very important thing to question, right? Why has not been there any solution that you feel is right? Why has no one thought about it? So that is a very interesting and important question to ask yourself. And finally, I think, why would people come to you, come to your brand, your app, your service to solve that, right? So yeah, and here I think the understanding the motivations of people is very, very important. So with this lens, in this phase, I tend to ask, what is the why? Like, why is this thing here? Why am I doing this? And all sorts of whys, right? And in this phase, you can be imaginative, right? Like the creative superpowers you bring in as a designer, be as generative as possible in finding out the unique aspects of your product, unique features, your unique behaviors of your product that will really amplify the abilities of your user. With motivations, like I think motivation for people to use any digital service is either fear or desire. So and a lot of times it's a combination of both. So understanding the nuances of these motivations usually is very helpful at this stage. So you kind of know the direction very well, having those motivations clearly defined out. Next, we were talking about the binocular, right? And here is where I like to think myself as a scaler, and it's about like checking your surroundings, right? Like imagine what a binocular actually does, like checking your surroundings while you walk towards that North Star. As a scaler, you build connected hypothesis, right? Like you define the hypothesis of each stage of the product, like what needs to be done in order to learn something, and based on the outcome of that learning, what is the next step. So you basically formulate your path towards building towards that vision, right? You chalk out the pros and pros of your decision. You test and retest your MVP. You work towards formulating guidelines and systems. A scaler should ideally have the ability to identify the risks and threats of the product. It's very important in today's day and age. And question each decision before strengthening the belief in that, right? Scalers should also put themselves, and this is very important according to me, is like a scaler should also put themselves in the don't know state of mind, right? Like in Buddhism, there is this concept of the don't know state of mind. What does that mean? Is like if you really want to learn something about your surroundings, you unlearn things about your surroundings first. So in this like rapidly changing world, it'll help you to unlearn first, and then let go what you know, observe and be aware of your context. So a scaler's job is to kind of think about it that way. And in this phase, I like to kind of find the how, like how will I do something at a stage, right? And how will I be more responsible? Here is where you actually think about all the antagonist situations, right? What are the risks? What are the threats? What if the user, finds it this way? What are the disadvantages of doing it this way? And more of the antagonist scenarios, right? So in a nutshell, like be responsible. And as I said, like keeping that don't know mind is very important. And there's this beautiful quote by Alistair Smith that I really like is, at times of change, the learners are the ones who will inherit the world, while the knowers will be beautifully prepared for a world which no longer exists, right? So the new normal that we are in today, the COVID situation, is a great example of that, right? I mean, world is changing. You never know what happens tomorrow. It's always good to keep a side of your head or mind empty, so that anything that is new just fills in and you adapt to those situations.
Hey, Debashish, sorry,
Yeah.
just a reminder, if we can wrap into the next few minutes, we can open up for Q&A.
Yeah, sure. This is my last stage of the 3-lens process. So the last one is Magnifier. I call this the optimizers. Here, you really dig into observing the little changes that can bring big impact. The optimizer thinks about micro behaviors of the product and all the micro interactions that you see around the internet is, I think, a good representation of how optimizers think. how the product responds, how it rewards, and how it forgives, and all those things. So basically, the God is in the details, as they say in an idiom of German art history. So that is where you bring your users trust, let them connect the dots, and have a more holistic experience. As a closing thought, right? I think you can actually apply this framework as a solo designer when you're working on solo projects with partners and with teams. Like you can divide these roles for different people who have different strengths and weaknesses. So based on that, you can actually run this. And I feel like we can contribute a tiny bit for the world to move in the right direction. It's important for us to understand that everything is fragile. Any app, service, or product you are currently working on has worked or you have worked in the past is just a short blip in the timeline of everything, right? So let go. I think what really matters is the way you think, the way you build things, the way we design things. And these intentions, these reasons, they keep repeating, they keep evolving, and eventually we evolve, right? And if you understand that, we can achieve this. So thanks, and that's pretty much what I wanted to say today.
Thank you, Devashish. I think that was a beautiful way of putting it through. I love the way you said about the explorer, scaler, and the optimizer, and how do you kind of build something out of the fear or the desire to use it, and going back to the basics of the need. All
Yeah.
right. So I think we can get into some of the questions. I already see some of the questions that have come in. So we have Puneet Sadrangani, and his question is that in a lot of cases, the ideas flow from the top management who carry a preset mindset of profit. In that scenarios, how does the brainstorming that the designing team does that are already available solution, can they just be remodeled, or how they should remodel and put it in front of a profit oriented management?
Yeah, that's a good question and a very important question. I would say, here is where you make decisions about being a designer, right? Like how do you want to grow? You want to work for someone or a company which is profit minded and not think about the user. Then you have a different playbook of doing that. And if you really want to create the change, you have to find out how to communicate. And I think this is like one of the most important traits or skills of a designer, and in this today's day and age, is the way you communicate. Can you convince? Can you sell the idea of being a design-centric company, and how a well-designed product or service in the long run will actually reap you a lot of benefits and profits, right? So you have to take that challenge rather than designing the pixels and the mocks for what you've been asked for, right? So I think, yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You take your decisions, you work with people you really want to grow with and change things in the world, or if you're stuck with people who are profit-minded, try to be a great salesman first and then a designer.
Absolutely. I think going with that conviction and telling up the story, I think would do that. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I'll get into the next one, which is, I think, more about the user research, that how do you ask the question to the recruiters? Do they know their products before, they're asking to the users? So how do you kind of work with the user researchers?
Actually, it's very different in different contexts, right? Like, I mean, just a bit of background. I was working at Yahoo in Bangalore before moving here in the US. And once I moved, I saw there was a huge difference in the approaches we take, um, especially in research. And I'm not saying that is still the same in India, because I'm talking about like something that is like 6 years, 7 years ago. But I think it's also like company centric, right? I mean, the kind of business you are in, the kind of investments you want to make in doing the research. I mean, relating to the first question, if you're really money minded, you might want to skip that process, because it takes time, energy, and money to kind of do research. So that is, of course, the first point there. But I think when it comes to me, I think over the years I've found that how integrated these two functions are. Like, I've seen a lot of designers who do their own research, and I really feel great about that ability. I somehow have the maybe luxury of, like, working with proper full-fledged research teams. So I usually, I'm like very, very tightly integrated with my researcher when we're solving a problem together, and we kind of, take our roles. Like I said, like I talked about the hats in my lens approach, right? So maybe in the initial phases when I'm being the explorer, that person becomes a scaler and, like, thinks about, the nuances of certain things that we want to build first, and kind of create a playbook of how do we want to, or what kind of users do we want to talk first in order to learn our first basic hypothesis, right? So I think those are the 2 points I would like to make here.
Absolutely right. I mean, a tight story with the researcher kind of leads you to find the outcome that you're looking for. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another question from Aniruddha Harshe. Very interesting question. Whether vision defines a dream. As you have said that with the help of 3 parameters, something design is always dream before putting on the paper. Whether vision is a desire. Can I trust in the dream instead of formulating an idea under given vision, my vision, and my desire? Do you want me to read that again?
No, it's fine. I think I get the gist of it. I feel like, let's define dream first, right? They say there are 2 types of dreams, one is which you see when you're sleeping, and one which you see with your eyes open. So I would say choose the latter, and the latter one has everything else. Like, I talked about the imagined reality, and you have to be real when you're dreaming something. So that is, like, I think my analogy of the dream, the aspect of design. And I would say, I mean, just don't term it as a dream, because it's there's this, like, very old saying about how an artist is different from a designer, and we have to be very responsible in understanding that we can't have our own interpretations for a product, right? Like, we can't have our own interpretations for a service. It's about, like, solving that need, solving that problem that I said, right? I mean, think about the early man, or think about the Wright brothers. If they really wanted to do something that they dreamt of, they would have designed something maybe else. But they had a very clear use case in mind. They wanted to go from point A to point B faster than a car, and not in the ground. And, like, what can be faster than something on the ground? So they saw this inspiration in a bird, and they're like, okay, I want to create something that will make me feel like a bird. And that was like a vision, and you can call it a dream, but I'm sure you don't see such dreams when you're sleeping. So you have to be aware when you wake up and your eyes are open, you actually look at those dreams, maybe, and then strive towards achieving those.
Very true. I mean, yeah, just keep your eyes open and you'll find a lot of different problems that you can be solving for, and bring in the design. Okay, so there's another question from Digvijay Thakur, which says, what is that quotient that defines the success of a product design?
Quotient. Yeah, I mean, people, based on their context, like businesses, based on their context, they define their success metrics, right? We all know about it. So that is I would say that is the more practical way of doing it, because what we are doing in our day and age today is, like, we depend a lot on data science, right? And it's a beautiful thing to do, because we have the ability to understand data, understand people behavior from data that we see, right? But I think there is, I mean, I don't know if there is a certain quotient. Like I said, I mean, there are 2 main motivations for any of your product to be used, right? It's either fear or desire, or it's a combination of both, right? If you feel that after using a product, people felt that they could use the product with this ability that we were talking about, that extended their ability, that made them feel smarter. That is actually, from a design point of view, I would say it's a great testimony of what you have designed actually is working with the users. But apart from that, I think there are so many overriding factors around the success metrics that you really can't ignore when you're in the business of making something. But yeah, I think those are some basic things that we can look out for.
Awesome. So there's another question from Alipta, which says that are we limiting our creativity by putting all our thoughts into making just an interface usable? Or there is a larger scope? What do you think about it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I would try to condense some of those in a couple of points. I feel there's a very interesting, I would say, because even I was in the same line of thought like years ago, and this understanding of an interface being the product, right? Um, your interface is not the product. Your interface is actually an interface to interact with your product, right? Um, so understanding that in the very early stages is very important. What you really need to understand is your product is a system. It's a machine that has a lot of parts, right? And some of those parts are physical, some of those are hypothetical, some of those are like digital, and they're like a lot of parts of it. Your brand is actually a part of a product. So think about it in a more holistic way, right? I mean, what do people actually perceive about your brand? What do people actually think about your brand? Why do people come to you, right? It's easy to understand this with examples, like when you think about music, which app comes to your head first? And if you like dig through that, like why does it come as the first thing in your mind? Is it the interface only, or are there like many things, right? For me, for music, I really like use Spotify all the time. And I don't think Spotify has like created the best music interface ever. There are like interfaces that are more beautiful than Spotify. But I think what really matters in my music experience is more than the interface. It's about like the song that I'm looking for. Am I getting that, right? The moods that I'm kind of shifting through, the context that I'm moving through, the songs that I play when I'm driving, or the next song that comes in. My confidence in the product that the next song that will play is something that I like, right? So that is your product. That is how you're interacting. That is you're building trust with the product. So it's much more than the interface. So if you want to be creative and generative, think about it as an ecosystem, as a system that starts somewhere. It grows with people, and trust, expectations, love. Try to create that relationship with your user and the product. So I think that way you can be way more creative. That the canvas also opens up really widely in that case.
Yeah, I think you kind of talked about a lot of ingredients, what we talk for a habit forming product.
Yeah, yeah.
Great answer. So I think we're running out of time. So I'll just take one last question, Debashish. This is from
Sure.
Piyush, which is we generally think about creating, improving a lot of things. Some are fine, but some are far fetched. Where do we set the limit?
Yeah, great question. Especially in digital design, or like the software products that we design, I don't think there is a concept of a far-fetched idea, or a far-fetched vision. Things are changing every time, right? Like what you think about now, something that could be like 5 years from now, it doesn't work like that. Like everything changes. So set yourself for the current year or the next year maximum, and think about it this way, where like it's not going to be evergreen, right? I mean, what you create today, after 2 years it'll be old. There'll be a new product that will like crush the way you did things. Maybe your own version 2 will be totally different from version 1, and that's why we iterate, right? So I think that's one way to kind of definitely think about it and go forward with it.
Thank you, Debashish. That was a wonderful answer, and I think we have the poll now coming up. So please take a couple of seconds to give us the poll. Um, Thank you so much, Debashish. It was superb to have you here. And again, there is a certificate that we have in the, Hall of Fame, which can be found in the Product Leadership website, productleadership.com, and you can scan the barcode and have your virtual certificate. Um, this is really great.
Cool.
Thank you,
This
Deepshik
poll,
and Malti.
thank you so much. Yeah, I was saying this poll feels like a reality show, which is kind of cool.
Unless
But
you get
thanks for having me today. It was really fun to share some of these thoughts and have this conversation with you, Malti. Thank you.
Thank you. Same here. My pleasure. Thank you, Debashish, and thank you, Product Leadership team, and thank you, Menaka and Sonal, for helping us with this.